Well, can I first start by saying how delighted I am to be at my first ever Vegan Ladyboss meeting in New York City. I've watched Liz and her team grow this event, and I must admit, when I saw the pictures on Facebook, I experienced FOMO. For those of you aged 40 and over, that apparently means fear of missing out. So I'm very happy to be here. I think it's amazing. As a long-time feminist, I'm all about lifting, women supporting each other and lifting each other up, and when it's vegan women, it's even more special. So huge kudos to Liz and her team and everybody. So public speaking, about 15 years ago, my background is journalism. I was working for the Gay Press in Sydney, Australia, and they were holding a Mardi Gras event, and I was asked to be on a panel to speak, and it was actually a women's panel. It's called Women Say Something. So I'm sitting there on my stall, the audience is here like where you are, and there was 3 other female panelists, and when they did their talks, they all just kind of did them off the cuff, a bit like we just did when we just went round. What I did, I went into my bag, I pulled out this sheet of paper, I had typed my speech out, and I sat there and I looked up and down and I read it word for word. And the reason I did that was because I was terrified that I would forget my lines, I would look stupid, what would people think, are they going to judge me? So I've got 5 tips for you tonight, and the first one is take the focus off of yourself and place it on your audience. As a speaker, you're there to serve your audience and to give value to them. It's a little bit of a subtle mind shift, but when you do it, it really takes off the stress off you, it can make you feel a lot more comfortable, and it can make you a better speaker. Because the audiences, even you as you're sitting here, you're all thinking, whenever you're listening to a speaker, we're all thinking, what's in it for me? No matter how altruistic we are, or maybe we're being inspired, we're all thinking at the back of my head, how can I apply this to my life? So make sure you give your audience value and put the focus on them. My second tip would be, so this is around finding a style of presenting or a way of presenting and preparing that's right for you. So instead of doing the thing where I typed out the speech word for word and read it out, what I do now, if I'm speaking for anything up to about 30 minutes, I do what I'm doing now. So what I did today was I just created a list of 5 tips, 5 bullet points, and then I just expanded on them, because it's easy enough to remember bullet points. You're not learning word for word like you do in the theatre, but it's easy enough to remember those topics. And then you just run it a few times, like I did today. And what that means is, if I were to give this talk tomorrow night in New York City to another audience, I would cover the same ground, I would cover the same topics, but the words coming out of my mouth are not going to be exactly the same. That was such a relief and a burden to come off my shoulders, because you're not thinking, oh, what comes next? What's the exact word I have to use? So I'm just giving you some tips that are helpful for me, but like I say, you need to find what's right for you, but I've certainly found that really helpful. If I'm speaking for 35, 40 minutes and above, I will generally use a PowerPoint, and that's for 2 reasons. One is because for the audience, it's nice to actually be able to see something visual. However, when you're doing PowerPoint, use interesting images, and the image should just represent the theme of what you're talking about. Do not do death by PowerPoint and put loads of text on a slide and let your audience sit there and read the slide. It's taking, I'm sure we've all experienced that, it's taking the attention off you, it's not giving them any value. So basically you just want maybe 1 or 2 words, a few little words on a slide. So that serves the audience, but it also can serve you as a speaker, because it's a handy memory aid. So when you've got your little clicker and you're going to the next slide, oh yes, that's what I'm going to talk about now. So it has got a double way of serving both you and the audience and the speaker. But there's a disclaimer to that. Technology can and will break down. So even if you've got the best presentation or on PowerPoint or Keynote, whatever it is you use, if the technology breaks down, you do have to be able to deliver that talk without it. So don't rely on it, but it's a nice to have. My third tip is share stories. So if you can think of examples and stories to share, when people are bombarded with facts and information, they can often drift off a bit. But when, as humans, we are hardwired to love stories. So even if you've lost your audience a little bit, maybe they started to daydream, if you start to tell a story, it's a way of bringing them back. So have a think about some examples that you can use. So remember at the beginning, I talked about the story of how I gave my first public talk, and it was a bit dodgy. My fourth tip for you, and I'm delighted to be able to do this in New York City because it's so appropriate, and I'm sure many of you, especially those of you who are in the performing arts, but I'm sure most of you will have heard this. You know the story about someone arrives in New York City and they're new and they're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and they're strolling on and they see a local New Yorker and they say, hey, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? And the answer is? Practice, practice, practice. Exactly. Now all of a sudden I feel like tap dancing about Charlie, Judy or Liza. So practice, it's like any skill with public speaking. Do whatever you can to get in front of an audience. Join a Toastmasters. They have chapters all across the world. I even heard there was a vegan Toastmasters in Los Angeles. I don't know if it's still running. It is, yeah. Maybe you can start one in New York. Practice with warm audiences. So what I mean by a warm audience, you're a warm audience. I'm sure there's nobody here that's sitting there thinking, I really hope Katrina screws this up. You know what I mean? Obviously you're a warm audience. So practice with small groups if you're nervous to build up your confidence. Use any opportunity you can to get in front of audiences. There are so many events that are happy to have speakers. Speak for free to begin with so that you just get in front of your audiences, so practice. So my fifth and final tip is be you, and this is really important. So there are a lot of books out there are a lot of trainings out there that will give you lots of tips on how to be a good public speaker. Do them, there's lots of useful information. Take what works for you, but don't be afraid to discard the rest. I once did a public speaking training and they said, right, whenever you're giving a talk in public, keep your hands by your side. I can't keep my hands behind my side. We naturally gesticulate. Now obviously, you don't want to go overboard, so you don't go, unless you're doing a talk, an expressive dance, that might be appropriate, but you know what I mean, you might want to bring it back a little bit, or if you speak fast like I do, I have a natural tendency, as you can imagine, to speak quite fast. You might want to just slow it down a little bit, but when you see a speaker and you're inspired by them, take what works and then make it your own. Don't mimic them. You don't need to be like anyone else. And I think if you don't remember anything else, or if you take one thing away today, is just remember that to be you, because as women, I really think that vegan lady bosses have the potential to change the world. We really are a force to be reckoned with, particularly when we come together and support one another. As women, we often, and female identified people, we often suffer from imposter syndrome, feelings of not good enough, not being worthy. So please, you hear it from me. You are worthy, you are enough, you are good enough. And remember, when you're speaking, say you're talking about veganism, you could be have a whole audience of people, and quite a few of them there, they may have heard about veganism, they may have heard about the same topic, they may have heard the same information from 100 different people, and it's just gone over their head. But then they hear it that 101st time from you in the way that only you, no one can do you can only present your message in the way that you can. That might be the time that something clicks and they go, oh, I get it now, I'm going to go vegan. So you're all amazing, vegan lady bosses rock, so please find your voices and go forth and spread the message.